You come home and you're like, all right, how are the kids? How are they? Timmy, Tommy, get on my lap. How are you? Oh, and hey, babe, what are we doing? We really want to like help them increase their language and stop this stutter. We're not doing any of that shit.
It's a good accent. I like that character.
That character would be hard to raise children with.
Okay, so let's record the intro now.
So what did Milkless? Because I think we start with the name.
Two dads, we love our kids. But then we also need them to know that we're like pretty cool and it's not like a wimpy podcast. So, hey. Hey, Milkless.
Hey, welcome. Hey,
Milkless. Call the audience Milkless. What's up, Milkless? Max coming at you.
What if that's it? That's our first take. What's up, y'all? We're back for, well, I guess we've kind of arbitrarily decided it's season 3 of the podcast. But man, we got a lot of stuff going on that we're pretty excited about. First of all, we got the second Violet Archer book, Violet Archer and the Case of the Secret Scribe, coming out in the next couple of weeks. We're also working on the audiobook for book 1, Case of the Purple Martin. That's going to be voiced by none other than Caitlin Murray of Big Time Adulting. So that's the book front. On the podcast front, we're going to be trying some new things, seeing what sticks. For starters, we're going to be trying to release 2 episodes every week. So every Thursday, we're going to have Max and I just talking about what is happening in our lives as parents and adult humans right this second. We're calling those episodes, perhaps foolishly, When Equals Now. Tuesdays, we'll release our more normal episodes, kind of a more structured topic. But those episodes, too, will be a little different because we've got a lot of guests coming on the show this season. We've got Colton Underwood of The Bachelor fame. We've got the aforementioned Caitlin Murray, who inexplicably has agreed to come back on our podcast for a second time. We're talking to Dan Koch, host of the brilliant podcast, You Have Permission. But in addition to all those folks who we're really excited about, we're going to be talking to our friends. Kind of trying to like bring the village onto the show. Apropos of that, our first guest of season 3, Sam Stolper, is here, a good friend of both Max and mine. This guy is a father of one. He's a professor and a scientist, but more importantly, he is a man of great principle. He's a person that truly lives what he believes. I'm honored to call him my friend. We're honored to have him on the show. We're going to be talking about kind of the idea of intervention and intervening in your kid's life. When do you decide to step in and maybe try to help them with something they're struggling with? When do you hang back and let them try to figure out themselves? Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm sorry. Let's go.
All right, Matt, here we are. We are back, season 3, coming at you live via satellite. Not really. This has been previously recorded.
Lies.
But we have a guest with you today. It's Sam Stolper. It's one of our good friends from college. Matt, you want to say some kind words about Sam, and then we'll let him speak?
I can't really think of anything.
Terrible guy.
Oh, Sam. Terrible. Just terrible. Man, just a singular person, a singularly thoughtful person. I always, Sam used to come over senior year. There's a lot of chuckle-headed behavior to be had in college. We did plenty of acting dumb, but Sam would come over and he'd bring like tea, like good tea, and a chess set. And we'd drink tea and play chess and just fucking talk about the world. And then probably go play basketball and then drink our faces off. But it was you've always had this approach to life that is like measured. We bust your balls about that you're slow because you just eat. I mean, you eat, it's too slow, but it's fine.
Sam Stolper, ladies and gentlemen. Sam, welcome to the program. How you doing?
I do a lot of things slowly, and I take a lot of pride in it. I'm doing great. Hello, my name is Sam. I am milkless, and it's great to be here with you guys.
That's great. Thanks for coming, man.
Amazing.
Well, what are we talking about, Maxie, baby?
Yeah, so Sam, like today, what we're going to talk about, we asked Sam some things that are like going on in his parenting orbit, and we came up with a pretty good topic for today. What happens when you navigate something that's kind of like one of those tough decisions in parenting? You're at the playground, maybe your child doesn't have as many words as some of his cousins or the other kids. Is that an early intervention sort of situation? So we're going to talk a little bit about that and navigating that sort of decision, but then also just like how to navigate that with your partner when you maybe agree on 99.5% of the things. And then this is something where, this is like a tricky one.
Yeah. I mean, it could be language. It could be physical. I know that at times, is it an emotional thing, an anxiety thing? Like we're always kind of watching our kids like hawks, hoping they're doing good. and wanting to step in if it'd be helpful, but not step in too soon. So Sam, you had like a specific story, I think, that kind of sent us down this path of talking about this. I wonder if you don't mind, if you would kind of like talk about what made this particular idea come to your brain.
Yeah, sure. Max already hinted at it, but I have one son, one child. He's 2 years, 2 months. Really, these days, the language is just exploding. This week, in fact, is the first week in which I'm looking at him thinking, like, you are saying full sentences. Not the prepositions or whatnot, but subject, verb, object.
Yeah.
It's wondrous. It's so cool to see. But several months ago, it felt like maybe he didn't have as many words as other kids his age. And, he's got one cousin right now. He's 3 weeks younger. So they're basically the exact same age. And it's a wonder for them to grow up together. That's awesome. But it's all too easy to compare, right?
Sure.
And I am very afraid of that. I really don't want to be comparing ever, but it's impossible not to. This kid has more words per sentence, however you want to measure it. So there's that comparison. And then, we got the parenting books lying around. A couple of them will report on the statistics. We'll give you like the distribution of words that children have over time. And you look at that and we think, all right, our son is, he's below 50th percentile, or he's below the 20th percentile, or whatever. I don't remember what it was, but you start to wonder. My wife and I, like many couples, operate on a kind of a yin and yang situation, parenting wise. We're both bringing stuff to the table. It's not totally complementary, like you two as podcasters. And so we didn't really see eye to eye on whether and when an intervention was called for to do something about this.
Yeah.
We discussed it here and there. Long story short, we did eventually decide to take advantage of a state-sponsored free program. Speech therapist type comes over periodically and observes our son, observes us interacting with him, and offers tips on how to improve, be more focused on the speech development. It's fine. I think it's just like inherently hard to tell whether that's actually doing something or not. The equilibrium we've reached is kind of that my wife, like, she comes home for those meetings, those appointments, and she like leads, and I'm a little bit more checked out, and I feel bad about that. And so I check in periodically about it. Like the couple times we've done that, it hasn't ended well because I have less interventionist tendencies for reasons we can get into more. And so maybe I said, yeah, cool, we'll do this. But I think I feel compelled to basically like make it clear that I'm still not totally on board with this every time we talk about it. And that doesn't end well. I mean, it's okay in the long run, but it's something that I'm working through and thinking about how can I be better here?
I share your non-interventionist bias. I think that there are merits to that, and there's also problems with that. I'm curious to have a conversation a little bit about where you think that comes from.
Me too.
Yeah. Have you found, Max, that you and your wife are like pretty aligned, or do you have different kind of knee jerks?
Yeah, I think we're pretty aligned. I think here's my thoughts on intervention personally. If your child is behind and let's say below that 25th percentile, and really by 2 years old, you should really only be able to say 2 by 2, 2 words in succession by 2. So we're talking like more milk, like words that help each other. Big cat. If they can do that at 2 years old, they're like at that milestone expectation. I think as long as you're not below that and you're behind maybe your cousins or your peers, it's not really needed. But I think a lot of people like want to put their best foot forward with their kids. And first of all, I want to I did a ton of research on the language thing today, so I'd like to realize that worked. But just really quickly, here's a rough number from the Hannon Center. 20 to 30% of late talkers do not grow out of their language delay, and 70 to 80% of late talkers seem to catch up to their peers by the time they enter school. So should you intervene or not? I just don't think that it's a bad thing. If, like, let's say your partner's really into the intervention, I think that there's a part of it where as parents, sometimes the non-interventionist parent feels like, oh, you're admitting that there's something wrong with my child.
Bingo.
That's definitely
bingo.
That's in there. I don't think I wouldn't say that that's all of it, but I think that there's some better reasons than that to be sometimes slow to pull the trigger. But I do think that's really in there, and it's not a good reason. So it seems like Honestly, there's a lot to recommend this approach. But Max, it seems like you're really going off, keeping an eye on the milestones. If we're really behind one of these milestones and it seems like intervention could be helpful, let's do it. But you're not pushing for your kid to be in the 90th percentile of everything.
95th percentile.
Yeah, like 99th. Come on, guys.
If they're going to live under my roof.
Top 1%.
Yeah, so like that's pretty much right. Like you don't want to have like a thing where I'm trying to push for like top whatever, but at some point you got to recognize that your kid is behind in something. Mm-hmm. For example, like one of our children wasn't crawling until 18 months, which is fine, whatever. There's new guidance that says like actually kids, there are no crawling milestones anymore.
Interesting.
But she was crawling with her like legs splayed out, like pretty far. And there can be like hip dysplasia type stuff. So just wanted to check on that. We've said this on the show before, like had a PT out in Amsterdam and they're just like, yeah, have her stand at the couch 10 minutes a day. No big deal. And then she didn't walk till like 22, 23 months.
She's trucking now though.
Oh, she's fast as fuck.
Like, yeah, she is. She really is. She's a fast kid.
Yeah.
Good for her.
It's wild.
So do you think the physical therapy was helpful, or regardless of whether it was helpful, do you think it was a good decision?
I think it was neutral. Maybe it sped her up by a week or two, but it was the type of thing that, okay, why not do it? It's that thing that pings into the back of your head. Like, you just want to make sure we're not like neglecting the child.
Yeah.
How could it hurt?
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a bigger problem, not to get macro, bigger problem in American society of like, we probably need more early intervention than less.
Well, I feel these two competing things at the same time, because on the one hand, with how much we're learning about like how much easier it is to change when you're little than later, it just gets harder and harder to change your whole life, it seems like. That really does recommend for more early intervention and more awareness around where you could like do something comparatively minor in an early stage of a kid's life and have it really impact in a big way. I have this countervailing feeling that like, we know we fucking over medicate in this country. We know we over everything. We over intervene like crazy in so many aspects. And then we live in these kind of unhealthy ways. And then we intervene like a motherfucker.
Hold on. Wait, Matt, are you saying that it's not the two extremes? It's somewhere in the middle?
What are the odds?
That just can't be right.
It certainly doesn't make good content.
No, I want to find a solution.
This shit will not rip on the socials.
But so Sam, why don't you dive into a little bit of your, you said you had some anti-interventionist tendencies.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, sympathetic to what you just said, Matt, and I feel you too, Max, but when you said like, we don't intervene enough, my instinct was like, Okay. It's like, actually, I think I'm coming from the other perspective. Why do I feel that way? It's tied up with who I am. And I like to be chill. My spirit animal is a camel. I'm like,
oh, man.
I really own that. You know, I feel good about it. I take pride in being a camel. But so patience and calm and like not overreacting. And on the Frisbee field, like our mutual friend Bez heard somebody call me chilly with the disc. That's the jargon in Ultimate Frisbee for being like super calm. You're so chilly, you're like Iceman. And that has been my nickname since then. Right. So I'm not trying to overreact. And in the case of speech development, you know, I was struck by the statistic you reported, Max, on like the percentage of kids who, you know, do catch back up versus don't, because my instinct or what I wanted to believe was like, he's good. He's gonna be good. Like maybe he says 2 words instead of 2.7, like, you know, the average says, but he's not like, I think it's going to wash out, right? Yeah. I think in a year or two, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference. He will have caught up. One of you also brought up, I think it was you, Max, what's the downside of intervention? That turned out to be a really valuable question. When I came to it, I was like, oh, this is a good line of thought. Okay. Because, also, by the way, my wife said exactly what you mentioned. Like, it's okay for our son to not be perfect, you know, to have something that he could be better at. Yeah. And I think she did hit a nail on the head with that. It's like, oh yeah, like I think I don't want to admit that.
Yeah.
I'm also like a perfectionist, and that's my problem. That's not his problem.
Yeah.
So that's an important lesson for me. Just, you know, a repeat lesson of, you got to be you, but you're not trying to graft you onto everybody else. It's, including your own child.
Okay. Love this.
With respect to the question about like, what's the downside of intervening, at least in this case, when I reflect on that, not a lot, really. This is what I came up.
Yeah.
At least in the short term is like, okay, what made me feel a little more, I don't know, justified or like, okay, now I'm figuring out why I want to do this is the long-term consideration. I think there's a fear in my pride and appreciation for my own like calm, try to be laid back. I'm scared of like my kids being high strung.
Yeah.
And it feels like if this keeps happening, if we keep intervening, then is this going to show up in a few years as a kid who has a tough time?
Yeah. Just creating an anxious environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also, like I have kids in school age now, like that are reading, and kids are reading at a level that I swear to fucking God, we did not do back in the day.
Yeah.
Like they're reading at an insane level. So it's like, oh yeah, so-and-so, we have friends of friends who are like, yeah, our son, your daughter's in, reading side classes. And it's like, wait a minute, they're in like first grade and they can't read a chapter book yet. It's like, yeah, that seems kind of
okay.
Advanced.
Park City, we can cut this because I know a lot of your friends there listen. Park City is a competitive place. People it's a downhill skiing town.
Race you to the end of this page.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think part of it is that it's just a small community. So you really all know what's going on with everybody. And it's just like a bunch of like really high achieving people that live there generally too. And everybody that I've met, your friends in Park City, are lovely. But it is like your kids are racing each other down mountains for first.
I completely agree, which is why I'm kind of like springboarding off Sam's comment and agreeing that if you develop a culture of intervention. With that said, I have another intervention story about the stutter of one of our children, that the whole intervention was us in terms of how fast we were talking and how fast I was reading books, which in a way caused that stutter. The minute we removed that stimuli, it went away. But anyway,
it's great that you figure that out. Because if you don't introspect, if you don't self-intervene and be like, all right, is there what's going on? Then you won't realize that.
Well, we didn't I'll redo a story from a previous episode where we were like, I didn't say it like this, but basically say, all right, so fix our kid. This is great. We're getting this done.
Fix him up.
Fix him up.
Just get him fixed up. Send him back to us.
Just 6 weeks, we'll pick them up. And
6 weeks, sure.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
So then, we drop them off at the kennel, and then we pick them up after the. But then the entire thing was about us, and they're like, "Okay, so what do you guys do at bedtime?" I'm like, "Oh," they're like, "How many books?" I was like, 5. How fast do you read those books? And I was like, I literally speed read them, and if he tries to speak, I start talking louder and faster. So he cannot speak because he sails me into reading 5 books. So I'm reading them very fast. They're like, oh, how's the speed of your conversation with your wife? Basically, it's like the people listening to this podcast on 1.5x. That's how fast.
You guys go pretty fast.
That's how fast my wife and I speak.
Yeah.
So they're like, slow down the books, 1 book at a time, pause for 10 seconds between pages, slow down the conversation at the dinner table. And if your son starts to stutter, get down on his level and just don't say anything and just give him the time to speak. Because he was trying to merge at a 90-mile-an-hour Audubon highway.
There's a lot that's cool about that story. And one thing about it is there's a lot of different kinds of interventions, right? There's putting somebody on a pill. And there's also, hey, could you change the way things operate at your house a little bit? All of you. My wife is a therapist, and she said people used to send him their kids all the time and basically say, can you fix her? She's acting weird. And then my wife would say, can I talk to you guys? And they'd be like, why? Well, why would we do that? We're not here for that. No, talk to. Yeah. And there's a saying that's there's no such thing as just a kid. A kid's a part of a system with their parents and with their family. So it's the interventions that change the way that you operate in your day-to-day life rather than trying to fix some problem, those feel really easy to trust.
Our experience with the speech therapist coming through was pretty much the same. It was she wanted to watch us interact with our son and see how we could do it differently because, of course it's not his fault.
I'm kind of with you, Sam. I'm down to not be an interventionist. With that said, I'm torn. With the stutter, I believe, sample size of 1, that we were causing that stutter because the early intervention people came, told us 3 things to do. We did them for 3 months, and the most debilitating stutter went away entirely in 3 months. So there's also language delays that are the parents' fault. And I don't think that was your case, Sam. But that's why it's kind of like not cut and dry.
Yeah.
It's like
I wouldn't even go so far as to say like fault. There are things that can be challenging for kids that you can help with by changing the way things go in your house.
it's because you don't want the parents to feel bad. I don't want the parents to feel bad either, Matt.
Yes, I actively don't want the parents to feel bad. I think
I
that,
know, but what if the
parents
parents what if the parents are straight up not communicating with their child, period?
Yeah, you got to talk to your kid.
Is it their fault if they're delayed linguistically?
Yes. I mean, yeah, sure. I just don't see what the purpose of that is.
But do you have to say it like that? It depends. Max, do you respond to negative
You're not
feedback?
wrong, Walter. You're just a fucking
Just an asshole. Well, I just think if you can find me an example of shame being an ultimately positive motivator for anyone ever, I will be fucking amazed.
All right. The other difficult thing that I think your spidey sense was tingling on, Matt, when I said it's the parent's fault, is that the converse of that is also just not true. Like, just because in my case, I believe I caused that stutter and it was, quote, my fault, you can kind of conflate that in the other direction and kind of say, okay, well, if not speaking at all to a child ever for the first 2 years of their life will cause a language delay, well, then speaking to them and narrating the diaper change will make them incredible at language. And in Emily Oster's podcast that she did with Michael Frank, a professor at Stanford, who works on this exact question about how children learn to speak. And I really respect her and how she approaches these sorts of topics. She was like, tell me I don't need to narrate the diaper change. And he was pretty much like in that camp of like, look, if you have a household where you are speaking to your child in a good, constructive way, like that is engaging for them, it's not just like, just literally talk at their face, quantity, whatever.
Yeah. That's the anxious household, right? That's the like cautionary tale that Stolper, you were describing. You're like, you want to live in a way that just feels natural, like you're living with people.
Totally.
And your kids are just people in the house.
Yeah. Look, we all agree it's a gray area, and we're not going to come up with like an algorithm for determining whether in situation A versus B versus C, yes, you intervene, no, you don't intervene.
Yeah.
We're never going to come up with that. But what can be constructive is just, what are the places to stop and think to help you navigate that? One of them for me that I already said was, all right, is this actually a problem for their quality of life or not? Another is, what are the reasons why I don't want to intervene here?
Yeah.
That question of what's the downside got me there.
It's like, what is the intervention? Like, if it's somebody coming over to your house and hanging with y'all that knows a lot of stuff and it's not at all scary for your kid, and maybe it's even like extra attention. I mean, that's like what going to therapy is for grownups. Like, the act of going is supposed to be nice, or not always nice, but like worth it.
Totally right. You reminded me of one of the earliest opportunities for intervention in my life with my son, like a week or two into his life. He was like jerking in his sleep. The neurologist that consulted with us was like, all right, if you want to do something here, then you bring him in and we're going to attach some electrodes to his head and we're going to keep him for a couple nights and we're going to, observe him. And it sounded really intense.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how costly in various ways, whether it's time, money, or like psychological burden, is that intervention. In this case, we still thought about it. We ultimately did not do it, and the jerking went away. But I understand why somebody might have more front of mind than me, the possible downside outcome of that, and just go for that.
Like, I wish my wife would intervene when I'm jerking in my bed.
Oh, that's so good. Oh my God.
Sorry, just literally, I'm 12 years old. This episode is brought to you by Violet Archer in the Case of the Purple Martin. Thank you so much if you've gone on Amazon and bought it. It means so much to us, but we're going to ask for one more small favor. Right now in this phase of the book series, we'd love to get some more reviews. We're going to come out with a couple more books in the coming months, and we'd love to have more reviews on there. That's the most important thing we can get right now. So if you wouldn't mind, pop back onto Amazon, give us an honest review. It means so much to us. Thanks so much for listening, and back to your regularly scheduled programming.
this topic, for me also ended up being fertile ground for reflection on the partnership and on what to do when we disagree. I'm really conflict averse. And so then I end up not saying things a lot of the time. And I don't explode more than other people do. I think probably less, but when it comes out, it's passive aggressive.
It's been marinating for a while.
Yeah. Nice braise, several hours, several weeks,
Months sometimes. You can age that shit for months. It comes out so tasty.
Months sometimes. So where, upon that reflection, I was like, all right, I got some work. I remember in wedding planning early on when you're navigating lots of different strong preferences, and the rabbi who co-officiated our wedding was like, you got to be a united front on this. And that was a recurring theme. And I think we're pretty good at that, but especially due to my conflict avoidance, we don't always come to a point where we're like, okay, we have agreed that we are going to do it this way. Another example, this is really trivial, but our son has this tower that he can climb into easily. And he loves to get a little daredevil with that. Yeah. He's lifting his feet off. He's on the edge a little bit. And my wife comes into the room and sees that and is like, that's not that safe. I'd rather you not do that. And I'm like, yeah. But in my head, it's that looks kind of fun. Dude. I kind of want to do that too.
All right, here's the other thing that makes this thing about intervention so fraught. It plays out on a micro scale every time your kid leans on the counter a little bit or climbs a little bit high. How much are you going to intervene? The basic idea, how much are you going to intervene in what your kid's doing?
Yeah.
And I wonder, and who knows how much of this is culture versus how much of this is hardwiring. But I feel as a dad, so often we're just let him do it. And that is not always the right instinct, but I think it is a real fucking dad move.
Yeah.
My wife is actually really good about that with physical stuff, probably better than I am, which actually embarrasses me. I'm like, nah, I gotta get on the other side of her on that.
You're not representing the gender.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where if it's coming up a lot, someone's gotta be the one to bring it up.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's going to be a death by 1,000 cuts over time where you're kind of not seeing eye to eye, but they're not important enough to start some shit.
That's the thing. Every individual one seems petty, but then as soon as they're like, why are you bringing this up? You're like, well, this and this and this and this. And they're like, oh my God, what are you just fucking loading these?
That is so fucking important.
It's so important.
Whether you set a weekly time and it's no one wants to harsh the mellow when you're having a good time. But if there is a time when you're not stressed out, which is probably few and far between, that's when those little grievances need to come up.
I feel the best time to bring that up is at the end of a 4-hour really just angrily silent car ride, because we're all just coming at it calmly.
That's totally wrong. You need to be completely drunk.
Oh, you need to be drunk.
And have your in-laws, both sets of in-laws staying in the house. That's when you do it.
That's what you want.
Hey, there's been something I've been wanting to bring up.
Oh, man. The other thing, truthfully, is I think you, Sam, my wife has a stronger impulse to get in there. And I think that probably that argument is useful between those impulses. And especially if it's not an argument, if it's a conversation. And it's why, Maxie, you're right. You really need to be talking about it. But it sucks that is often particularly if you're a little conflict averse, that's often what it takes is a big argument.
Yeah. Also, after a night of drinking, much to my wife's chagrin, we can't go to bed mad, babe. We can't go to bed mad. She's like, let me go to bed mad. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'm like, can't go to bed mad. Can't go to bed mad.
We don't. My wife and I don't last very long with the mads either. It's we end the conversation with modest resentment, and then 15 minutes later, I'm back in there man, I didn't love how that went. I'm sorry.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, no, that's great, man.
Yeah, I know you were trying to give me some love, Max. Don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah, well, if you have that feedback loop, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. I just will say, because Sam, I know your wife very well, and I don't mean this in a mean way, but y'all are two of the nicest people I know, and it makes me feel good that y'all still fight.
I'm glad to give that gift.
Matt, if we had a fly on the wall camera to see that fight, I don't think it'd be considered a fight in most of our marriages.
Well,
DQ'd.
I've seen you fight. Max doesn't fuck around. They don't fuck around. They get into it. It's so good. It's like, oh boy, here you go. And like people get real uncomfortable, and then you realize like they're not uncomfortable. Like this is like they're just doing it.
Yeah, and that's healthy for them.
Everybody's got a different version of healthy.
Dude, I'm telling you, I admire your fucking style. You guys don't let things simmer. I think the simmer is much more dangerous than to have it out. I am not like I'm giving you shit, but I really do admire it.
Yeah, no, we got a few friends like that, and they're role models. Like I think my wife and I both know that we could use a little more of that.
One thing I think about a lot, man, because we named this podcast Milkless, so intrinsic to it is an awareness that like there's something that mothers have that we don't. But I really want to have a say in how we parent our kids, because I think we'll be better parents if we do it together. But I really feel like I need to earn that shit. I consistently feel like I need to earn having an equal voice in the way we parent our kids, because I work more hours, because I spend more time away from the house. And honestly, because she's their mom.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, especially if the mom is kind of like roughly primary caretaker, you're roughly primary worker. You come home and you're like, hey, listen up. You're not doing it that way.
Right, exactly. Make me a fucking sandwich. You're not doing it that way. Yeah.
It's like, all right, how are the kids? How are they? Timmy, Tommy, get on my lap. How are you? Oh, and hey, babe, what are we doing? We really want to like help them increase their language and walk faster and stop this stutter. We're not doing any of that shit.
It's a good accent. I like that character.
That character would be hard to raise children with.
Yeah. I feel you, Matt. My partnership conforms to one stereotype very strongly, which is that my wife does like 98% of the logistics, which I am failing at. I feel bad about that. Because of the flexibility of my work hours in particular, that allows me to cover for us with the physical care more, actually, which is maybe not the stereotype. But most of the time when my wife plans something or decides what we're doing, I'm like, great. I'm glad you did that, because I didn't really want to think about that.
Yeah.
But there are moments when I'm like, oh, I kind of wish I had been involved in that.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, oh, but if I'm going to like,
you gotta earn it.
I got to take the good with the bad, right? Like if she's going to put in all the work, then I got to let her probably lead on this sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right. There have been certain medical things that my wife has researched the shit out of that she just made the call. And I was like, I just totally trust your judgment on this. And there are certain times when that led to us not making an intervention, because she felt like, oh, this is an area where that happens too much. But there have definitely been times when I've just been like, I don't think I have the bandwidth to do the amount of research that it would take to catch up with you to really be useful. And maybe that is selfish, and that like that stuff ends up in her court. But there does have to be some divide and conquer just to handle it all.
Totally. Can I share an inane story?
Yeah.
I asked my wife today, what have we disagreed on, like intervention-wise or parenting-wise? And a couple things came up, and then there was like a little silence. He was like, well, you could talk about that time 2 nights ago when we went to a Seder at a really nice home with a lot of like interesting art. There might have been an original Warhol on the wall. I was with my friend trying to figure out whether that was true. And my son let me know that he had to go potty. I think he might have said poop. I was like, all right. So I went and got the potty. And instead of taking him to the bathroom, plopped the potty in the library, and he, did his business. Somebody came in and was like, oh, then walked back out. It's like, oh, this is fine. But then he finishes the deed, and I have to like walk through the dinner party with this potty that's just full of deuce. And my wife is like, what are you doing?
You were just like, this kid is going to get to shit in bathrooms his whole life. But how many opportunities do you have to shit in a beautiful library?
Yeah,
staring at a Warhol.
Yeah.
Like, that's a once in a lifetime.
You got to expose your kids, give them a flavor of stuff, and then see what they want.
Brought to you by Violet Archer.